Good morning. Well, in fact, first of all, I'd like to say this. Again, we are again called Eutelsat because recently there was rebranding, the serious one in our group of companies, and since we are the world's first global multi-orbital satellite operator, we decided that our classical name will be the best reflection of who we are. So Mikhail noted this correctly when they speak about the satellite comms, satellite internet. Well, basically, they make the emphasis about on making access, internet access, providing internet access in some difficult terrain, some remote areas. This is the very important part of our work. But today we would like to take a look into the future and look at the next stages of the space internet development. Because we're not simply transmitting data via space. Globally, there is a move to actually place some internet infrastructure in the orbit. So basically, the important question, why place the infrastructure in the space and what are the key reasons for that? Well, we see three key factors that come into play. Sustainability or stability, and the age of cyber threats and global conflicts. The stability of the critical infrastructure becomes somewhat of a priority, and orbital nodes can provide protection from various attacks, shutdowns, and catastrophes. Number three, orbital routing. Orbital routing helps us to achieve the very low signal latency, both towards space, ground to space, and in between satellites. This is not limited by the difficulties we face on the ground, and satellite routing is much faster versus ground routing. So basically, using the satellite interlinks, optical links, these satellite links are used really widely in our satellite systems. This is going to be in the second generation, systems of the second generation. And these, the inter-satellite routing helps us not just route the traffic between the satellites on a single orbit, but also between satellites at different orbits, like geostationary orbits, low orbits, middle orbits, high elliptical orders, or high elliptical orbits. So dynamic data delivery to the network's edge. For some of these applications, like specifically mobile objects, orbital CDNA nodes can basically process data on board by ensuring high autonomy and high speed processing. So the question arises, are we actually ready for all of this? There is no complete readiness, of course. We haven't yet achieved this. I'm not just talking about the Eutelsat, I'm talking about all the others. But this readiness is just about to be approached. The European Space Agency, NASA, they finance some of the experiments with the orbital computations. ESA launched the project Advanced Research and Telecommunication Systems, where one of the priorities of this project, onboard processing and cloud services in the orbit. As part of the FISAT and FISAT-2, they already tested some of the Intel's chips on board of the small satellites for filtering and processing data for the remote sensing via the satellite, remote sensing satellite networks. And this is also applicable to CDN and IXP nodes. You can basically filter and process traffic closer to the nodes. NASA, as part of Space Communication and Navigation Program, they're developing the concept of delayed disruption tolerant networking and the orbital computations too. The project laser communication relay demonstration processes data transmissions at the speeds from 1.2 gigabits per second between the orbit and the ground. And basically, they already practically form elements for the future orbital data centers. And the other important NASA area, Lunar Gateway, the Lunar Gateway and the future lunar mission, where without processing data in the space, working will be impossible. At the level of ITU, the research commission number as G4. They are preparing data for the International Communication Conference of 2027, where one of the topics will be intersatellite lines and internetworking connections by satellites.
However, there are, of course, important issues as to how to coordinate and align all of these intersatellite links of different systems, such as OneWeb, CAPIF, and link intersatellite links between different types of the satellites. And of course, there is a question as to how to use these kind of orbital routers to direct and to direct the flows to avoid avoiding local IXPs. So when it comes to some private projects, of course, there are also some projects that help move the infrastructure to the space, to cosmos. And Kuiper of Amazon actually is one of the projects there, where integration of the solar infrastructure is one of the key for this solution. And the idea that satellites will not be just transferring data, but also will guarantee edge computing is one of the main ideas of the solution. And another important idea, or the kind of main idea, is that Kuiper Group can expand the AWS cloud in the space. Microsoft has Azure Orbital project. At the moment, the project is already being implemented as a ground station as a service. There is already kind of partnership on cloud computing with Microsoft. So in 2021, they have already launched kind of a pilot where data was already processed at the satellite level. So the logic of Microsoft is that cloud continuum needs to be established where the space will be yet another layer of Azure infrastructure. There is another very interesting project called the Levada Space Networks. I mean, they have some complications so far. They have had some of them, but they wanted to launch about 600 satellites, constellation of 600 satellites, and you will have the orbital mesh routing, innovative technology, meaning that every satellite will have the ISL, and they will be independent from having on the ground IXPs. We do see that the global ecosystem is shaping up as we speak, and in the upcoming years, we will see the implementation of all these projects. So as for our contribution and our role, well, clearly our company that has more than 40 satellites at geostationary orbits and also about 650 LEOs satellites. So we do believe that we're not just the providers of the capacity, but also we are one of the builders of the new infrastructure. So we can offer a OneWeb-based global LEO backbone with ISL of second generation, and it can become really the foundation, the cornerstone for traffic exchange to avoid kind of on-ground networks. GEO plus LEO will allow for a very flexible rerouting of traffic and will help distribute the traffic between those that require kind of a higher latency and the ones that are less sensitive to kind of longer latencies. So we do understand that orbital IXPs are very important, or especially important for those whole areas which do not have the optic fiber or where there is no fixed internet. And we therefore work with international organizations very actively to create a regulatory framework for all of these areas. Well, when it comes to the future infrastructure, this is the way it looks like. We are used to seeing these kind of schemes for on-ground solutions, but here all of these networks will be the same, but actually in this space. So this is how an orbital CDN or IXP might look like. It will be either a separate kind of standalone satellite or with additional functionality on board. And given the analysis of all the projects that are out there, and which exist, and considering the number of options, we think that there are several scenarios that are possible. So there could be an additional function added to the satellite, and I'm talking about the integrated model. The functionality will be available at the LEO satellite, and this satellite will have local caching, receipt and transfer of content, possible processing of data as well. Of course, there are a number of advantages to this kind of solution. However, there are also shortcomings. When it comes to advantages, those are kind of no need for an additional satellite. It will also be easier to coordinate the data exchange with the network logic. However, the LEO satellites are usually smaller satellites, so there are some restrictions. I mean, limited resources such as the energy, capacity, memory, and so on. And you can't really scale up LEO satellites that easily. Another one is the high orbit, high elliptic orbit. Satellites, then CDN will be taken out and kind of put to separate satellite, either as part of a cluster or a mixed constellation that will work in coordination with the high ellipse orbit satellite network. So, but it's easy. Actually, all you have to do is update the satellites on a regular basis, because it will be less critical for them to stay, without update because they're part of the satellite. But nevertheless, there will, of course, be some additional issues, such as additional orbital coordination, extra costs related to integration, and additional inter-satellite link rerouting between the main constellation and additional element. And the third option are the nodes that use high ellipse orbits satellites that will act as a regional hub. Then the functionality will be kind of entrusted with the geostationary satellites. They will have kind of longer time of visibility for a particular region, meaning that this kind of high elliptic orbit satellite will be able to cover cache and traffic delivery within the region for a very long period of time. It can be very easily coordinated at both the level of setting up regional hubs. I mean, installation will be easy. This high elliptic orbit satellites usually have a long kind of period of duration. However, there might be some issues with delay or with the latency, because the standard is not always adaptable to this high orbit satellites, and also the poles of the Earth are not covered well. So what are we going to need in the future? So we probably will need to integrate the state standard platforms. Then we will be adding and throwing in something to the modular platforms. And then there will be further integration with GEO, and using the GEO satellites as data centers, as IXPs, and connecting them with non-GEO satellites through ISL. That will be optical laser. I mean, we won't see in this space any interference with the quality of data transfer or the speed of data transfer between different orbits. In conclusion, I would like to say that on top of technical components, there is also a number of regulatory issues that are extremely important and that need to be paid attention to. as of now, because unfortunately, when it comes to satellite communication, satellite connection, we see that the regulation is lagging behind, especially in inter-orbit satellite communication. And therefore, we need to start working on adapting the regulation. The regulatory framework needs to consider all different aspects of rerouting and data transmission in the space. They shouldn't just be regulating the frequencies. They need to come up with the standards and with the parameters for these kind of orbital CDNs and OXP nodes and kind of general orbital rerouters. You need additional norms, additional measures to guarantee sustainability and safety, especially in guidelines and UN recommendations on space waste. It's an important issue that needs to be addressed. And of course, we need to set up partnership, because space internet or satellite internet should not be a luxury product. It needs to be open and accessible with the on-ground network. So the space is no longer a transportation channel. The space is the place where data can be stored, processed, and transferred. We're one of the largest satellite operators, and we're ready to collaborate with the states, with the government, with the cloud solutions providers, other providers, carriers, and telecommunication providers in order to